So we are back with some more Perils and Paradise cards to review. Today is all about Demon Hunter, and we got kind of a big Demon Hunter package and lots of little charging pirates. But to kick things off here, we're going to start with Arana Thrill Seeker. This is the new legendary. This one's the Priest Tourist, so if you add this into your deck, you can run Priest cards from Perils and Paradise. And it might be a teaser for what Priest is going to be about. We haven't seen any Priest cards yet, but this has a pretty specific effect. It's a 5 mana 5/6. Damage your hero takes on your turn is redirected to a random enemy, which in Demon Hunter, you have attacks from your hero, you have weapons, and that means anytime you trade into a minion and you take that return damage, it's going to instead be redirected. So instead of taking the damage yourself, you not only kind of avoid the downside of that damage, but you also get the potential upside of turning that damage into something useful. For instance, if there are 2 5/5s on board and you get up to 5 attack and you clear one of the 5/5s, instead of taking that 5 return damage, it's going to maybe hit the other 5/5. You'll get to clear both instead of one. Can also go face, importantly. This is a random enemy, not a random enemy minion. So you might be able to get 5 to face, which means sometimes if there's only one minion on board, even if it's like a 12/12 or a 15/15 Fanatum, right? You could just hero power, hit the Fanatum, and take a 50/50 where maybe that deals 15 to the face, or maybe it hits the Fanatum and clears the minion for you in that case. But basically it lets you kind of take some of this return damage and turn it into some pretty big potential upside, and occasionally some potential lethals and stuff. It makes it a bit of a risk for your opponent to play big stuff, because then you can sort of play your Arana and turn that threat into either removal or face damage. Now, the reason this I said might be a teaser for Priest is because Priest does not have ways to damage themselves very reliably. So it feels odd that this would be the card that encourages you to run Priest stuff. Some of the tourists have had fairly loose connections, I would say, to their touring class. So it doesn't necessarily mean Priest is going to get weapons or some sort of self-damage package that ties all this together, but maybe it's a hint for what we'll see in Priest. I think we're going to see Priest cards tomorrow, so we'll probably circle back on Arana for that one, but maybe there could be some Priest stuff Arana synergizes with as well. But namely, in Demon Hunter, I think this does give you that potential. The question, of course, is always is that going to be worth 5 mana, and how hard will it be to support this? In that instance of the 2 5/5s, you might want to get up to 5 attack to make sure that 1 5/5 dies and sort of, isolate or better isolate the potential targets for your redirect. If you hit for only 1 off a hero power or whatever, things might get kind of wacky. You might hit the wrong stuff. The fewer targets, the better. So if you're cleaning up 1 with your attack, that can help. You may not always need to, sometimes just using this to clear a single minion's okay, but you do have to have that additional mana for a hero power, or the ability to gain attacks, or a weapon that's pre-equipped and mathematically interesting. If you have a 4 attack weapon and you swing it into a 5/5, you might end up getting that 5 damage to just deal the remaining 1 damage, for instance, and that could feel kind of awkward and clunky. So sometimes, mathematically speaking, or just onboard opportunities for this to fit well, may not line up all that nicely. And it's got that 5 mana overhead. That's a lot to commit for an effect here with a relatively random result that does offer high roll opportunity, but not much else. Now, that said, I've always said that the tourist cards, they do offer you the ability to add extra stuff and extra things to a deck, and that gives them a slight boost. I think more potential to be played than other cards, but it is kind of hard to imagine how exactly this one, and Priest cards in general sort of fit into Demon Hunter with this effect specifically. So I'd say this is intriguing. It sounds kind of fun and chaotic and crazy sometimes, but I don't think it's especially reliable. It's a little bit expensive for this sort of effect. All right, so next up here we have Cliff Dive. This is a new 6 mana spell. Summon 2 minions from your deck and give them rush. They go back at the end of the turn. So potentially a way to cheat out some pretty big stuff. We've always had a little bit of big Demon Hunter things teased. Specifically with these, it's going to be things that have an upside on the card text in some way, because you're not keeping the bodies. I mean, the bodies are still useful because, you know, you can trade them in, and the rush aspect is nice as long as they survive the trades. But any additional upsides is great. And thankfully, there are some big Demon Hunter cards already that I think do sort of fit this mold. You know, you got like big lifesteal guy. Of course, you have Titan. The rush aspect may not be as important on the Titan, but, you know, you might be able to get a nice effect. You know, you could summon all the 2/2s or whatever with Argus. Some plays there. You know, you got Illidari Inquisitor. If you got an attack up, you could kind of summon 2 of these and just go absolutely ham for 7 mana, you know, and just whack the opponent for a ton of damage. So, you know, the stats matter. You know, that can be certainly meaningful, taking those trades, etc. But you know, having the bonus lifesteal, Titan effect, face attack, whatever it is, can stretch it even further. We're also going to see, I should tease this, a new big demon for Demon Hunter, the All-Terrain Voidhound. This reads, whenever this attacks, give your hero +5 attack this turn. So obviously summoning this, giving it rush, means not only, you know, do you get to clear potentially with a 5/8, but you also maybe gain 5 attack along the way. So that could be another good fit. And that's kind of interesting, right? This, I think, is actually a pretty powerful effect. If you bake the right minions into your deck, particularly that Illidari Inquisitor, I think is really kind of spooky. It's just always a deck building construction question when it comes to these sort of big cards, you know. Can you fill in the deck enough? Because if you put small minions in a deck, obviously the results of this are going to feel a lot worse. So, you know, can you build a deck that's isolated to big enough stuff to make this sort of card rewarding while still being survivable in the early game? And that is historically proven to be a challenge in many classes. You know, you have to have often enough like removal or survivability, and it's proven to be an especially big challenge, I think, very often in Demon Hunter. So there are some challenges there to consider. By the way, I didn't even talk about neutral big things, but obviously there are a ton of neutral big things you can run as well. I'm sure you can imagine a few awesome ones, and I'll just go ahead and pull up a few awesome ones real quick so we can talk about it. You know, there's the let's see, what is there? There's the Yogg Sarans, right? Yogg would be pretty cool off this. There's the, I don't know, Kolagarn. It's not the best example, but you get the idea. So anyway, you know, it's hard for me to imagine a world where Demon Hunter has a strong enough deck built around this. So like in a vacuum, in a perfect world on turn 6, yeah, this feels like a pretty good play. I think in a lot of cases, it's just getting to that stage safely, having a deck that makes sense around that. I suspect that's going to be a lot more challenging for Demon Hunter to pull off. So for me, Cliff Dive, I mean, cool idea, pretty nice in theory. In practice, much harder sell. Oh yeah, I gotta talk about this in Shaman too. I forget literally every video. Shaman is gonna be touring into Demon Hunter, and this could be an option for Shaman as well. You know, the same sort of, you know, big payoff things apply. Shaman does indeed have some really big minions. There's the here he is, the Walking Mountain, for instance, right? This has Lifesteal and Mega Wind Fury, so this would be pretty insane. You know, you clear up a full board and like fully heal and stuff off the Cliff Dive. Again, though, the same deck challenge exists where you have to build a deck to make this work. I think Shaman could probably get away with that a little bit better, because Shaman does have some other like survivability tools, including, you know, some that got added in this set specifically, like, you know, Frosty the Course kind of thing. It's like, you know, spell in the mid game keeps you alive into a Cliff Dive sort of turn. Keep in mind, to play this card, you also have to run Carefree Cookie. So if the minions did die off the Cliff Dive instead of going back into the deck, you know, there could potentially be a play here where you get a cookie down and you know, summon some big stuff, and then it gets turned into even bigger stuff. So there are some interesting lines there, but then, you know, if you're running Cookie in your deck and he's not in hand, you know, if you pull a Cookie off your Cliff Dive, you're maybe not quite as happy. Could still be a result if he gets, you know, one cool card with him, but it's just, again, deck construction, survivability, all of that starts to become an issue. Moving on to the All-Terrain Voidhound himself. This is a 7-mana 5/8 demon. Whenever this attacks, give your hero +5 attack this turn. And man, this is a card that's, like we said, probably pretty okay when pulled exactly off of Cliff Dive, but otherwise, I think just really bad. I think this is just going to be way too hard to stick and actually, you know, get it to attack for that upside. I'm not even sure the upside is all that good. We've seen faster, cheaper Demon Hunter cards offer similar sorts of upsides. I'm thinking about like the old Soul Fragment card, right? It was like a 5/5 that gave you +5 attack, and it's like that worked immediately. This is on a delay. You got to give it rush. You got to give it all this help to make this useful. And it's ultimately not even really that big of a body. There's some world where you start giving this like Wind Fury and some interesting things happen, but it's just so hard to get it out. It's so hard to get it to stick. It's so hard to navigate those attacks successfully. It's just like, how does this ever work without really dedicated support? And it's like, yeah, of course you can put it in a Cliff Dive deck and things will happen, but it's like if you draw outside of the Cliff Dive, you just got a completely dead card, and it's like, can you risk that if you're putting together a deck around it? I just don't see how, and I don't really see how this makes a lot of sense in Shaman either. This is one of those cards like, okay, cool, sometimes you'll randomly generate it, evolve into it, whatever, and it'll have its moments here and there, and the upside will be really nice. But I think actually trying to get this into a deck and making it work reliably sounds impossibly difficult. So moving on here to the Climbing Hook. This is a 6-mana 5/2 that doesn't lose durability while you control a minion with 5 or more attack. Which that's kind of a neat idea, right? Like this is a lot of potential long-term damage, just keeps hitting over and over and over again, as long as you're able to keep developing those 5 attack things, which again kind of points towards a bigger deck. It doesn't have to be crazy high cost to get a 5 attack minion specifically, but you probably have to trend at least towards, the 5 mana plus range to start getting there more reliably. There's some 4 mana stuff, of course. The challenge, of course, for a card like Climbing Hook is you're kind of all in on the damage aspect as soon as you like start spending 6 mana on just a weapon, and like you're committing that 6 mana turn, and then theoretically following it up on future turns with the 5 attack stuff, because I think it's pretty unlikely you stick a 5-drop with 5 attack and then play this on 6. You probably, the turn you play this, you've kind of fallen behind a little bit. And you're going from there, kind of trying to extend this out, turn 7, turn 8, turn 9, etc., as you keep redeveloping new 5 attack things. And again, that's a lot of inevitable damage, but it's just getting to that point safely, having such an expensive commitment stuck in your hand, and then having to play such an expensive weapon as well. And then like the kinds of decks that value damage output so successfully are typically decks that get ahead early and push a lot of pressure, and then use their weapons as finishers, not sort of use their weapons as ways to grind down the opponents over time. We've seen that occasionally, but it's pretty rare, and it's especially tough, I think, in metas where there's such decisive end game states that just kind of 5 damage a little over time isn't worth it. It feels like Demon Hunter should commit to more decisive game-ending lethality as opposed to kind of grindy turn over turn after turn damage. This reminds me a little bit of like the Foam Render in Death Knight, which hasn't really taken off. I thought it would be better than it was. And I think Death Knight is actually better positioned for this sort of card than something like the Foam Render, and that's cheaper and doesn't demand kind of as much dedicated support. I think the corpses for Foam Render, come a little bit more easily. I guess we should pull up Foam Render in case you guys haven't seen this one in a while. This is the Foam Render. Whenever your hero attacks, spend 3 corpses to gain +1 durability. Similar sorts of things, but that one just feels better to me. And that's not a great sign for Climbing Hook. And I think Shaman, it's the same sort of story. It's just Shaman maybe has a little bit more survivability to support this, but ultimately it just feels kind of slow and a big commitment. So moving on here to Skirting Death. This is a 3-mana shadow spell, which is kind of important, the fact that it's shadow. We've talked a little bit about Rainbow Shaman and the potential to get access to new spell schools via Demon Hunter cards, which is a little weird because the Demon Hunter Tourist cookie that we looked at earlier isn't really a rainbow support card, isn't really about spells at all. But we did get the Caress Cabaret Star and the other Cabaret Headliner card that all about spell schools. You want more spell schools. Now we're also gonna see a Fell spell as well. That's a fun rhyme to say. That seems far more interesting for Cookie, so there could be a little bit of like a hybrid thing happening, but it's kind of clunky, I think. But that said, Skirting Death is I think a ultimately pretty flexible card. 3-mana shadow spell, choose a minion. This turn, your hero steals 4 attack from it, which It allows you to do a few things, right? Like if you steal this from an opposing minion, it can allow you to like clear it safely. If there's a 4/4 on board, you just want to clean it up without taking any return damage. This is the perfect way to do that. Steal 4 from it. It's now a 0/4. You hit it, no damage taken. Same thing can be true for like rush minions as well. If you have some rush minions that want to trade in safely, you can steal attack from an enemy minion, trade in, use this 4 attack to hit another minion, clear it up, or maybe just push that damage face. It just becomes this weird kind of interesting little flexible removal tool. You could also, in desperation, use this on your own stuff as well. It's only this turn that you're stealing the attack. So, you know, it's like, it's fine to steal it from your own thing and then just slam face or whatever you need to do. And then, you know, your thing will get buffed back up at the end of turn. So it's not a problem as far as losing that attack upside the way this is written. So ultimately, you know, Demon Hunter kind of needs this sort of stuff sometimes, I think. Ways to manage the board, manage their health total, manage problems early while still sometimes developing and pushing that damage that sets them up for later, which seems relevant. For Shaman, you know, again, there is that shadow spell angle. I don't know that Shaman needs this sort of card as much. They have plenty of, like, you know, survivability and removal and all those little tools compared to Demon Hunter in many cases. So I guess the question for this one is really just coming down to, like, output. Is 4 attack enough for 3 mana when combined with that upside of potential utility as well? Like, I don't know. I think the lethality on this is iffy, but the utility supports it a little more. You know, it might hit a nice middle ground, but I don't think it's pushed. You know, if this was like 5 attack, I'd feel a lot more confident in this sort of card having what it needs to compete, because Demon Hunter just has a lot of efficient damage output, and this one could get kind of clunky sometimes. The math may not always line up well. I'm not actually sure also if it demands the minion have at least 4 attack. Like, we don't typically see negative attack values in Hearthstone. It goes to like 0 and bottoms out. Now, that said, the game does still recognize negative values, particularly when it comes to stuff like health and so on. So, you know, if there's a 2/2 on board, can you still get 4 attack, or can you only get 2 attack? That's a question I guess I have for this one. But it might increase the conditionality on it even more. It might be harder to get this to go off reliably. So, I don't know. I think this is basically fine. I think it's just okay, but it doesn't really excite me. I think the numerical value is just a little light on attack, or maybe just too high in cost comparatively. If this was 2/4 or 3/5, I think I'd be happier with this one. So moving on to sort of the other side of the Demon Hunter package, these cards look a lot scarier to me and a lot better. This is Adrenaline Fiend, a new 2-mana 2/2 demon pirate that reads, after a friendly pirate attacks, give your hero +1 attack this turn. And you'll probably remember we already saw Patches the Pilot, which was going to be a pirate himself, of course, and summon all these 1/1 pirates with charge into your deck, which won't hit super reliably, but will still occasionally hit and give you those moments to slam that Adrenaline Fiend and get that extra attack upside. Also, look at this. Sigil of Skydiving we teased earlier. At the start of your next turn, summon 3 1/1 pirates with charge. That is already a crazy setup. Like, coin this on turn 1, play Adrenaline Fiend on turn 2, and you have a monster 4 minion board that's hitting for like 6 damage on turn 2, right? 3 off this and 3 off your pirates. That's actually pretty crazy start, right? That is really, really overwhelming. We're also going to see Dangerous Cliffside, location that summons 2 1/1 pirates with charge and gets reopened after attacks, which isn't necessarily perfect for the Adrenaline Fiend, because you'll kind of lose the upside of the second half of the pirates. Like, you know, if you summon 2 to get the attack off the Fiend, and then you use that attack to reopen this, you will still get a nice 2 extra pirates immediately, but you lose that +2 attack again on the Fiend, because you'll get it, but you won't be able to attack a second time, you know, minus the Wind Fury shenanigans. But ultimately, still, you know, a way to more reliably have bodies, so that, you know, any given turn, you know, you can hit this button or whatever and activate your Adrenaline Fiend. So a couple extra ways to support that. That is not a pirate card, but some card draw fun stuff for later. So ultimately, what I'm saying is, I think this is a pretty spooky package that just allows you to push a ton of really fast damage. And, you know, it's also board too. It's not like you're just going at damage for damage sake. You're still developing board and threat as well. So The opponent really gets on the back foot from kind of moment one. I should also note we've seen already some neutral pirates as well that seem like they're stuff like the Hosen Roughhouser. Whenever another friendly pirate attacks, give it +1/+1, right? Again, this is kind of insane little aggressive pirate package coming together. Suddenly these might all be 2/2s instead, and it's just this monster overwhelming high pressure board. So I think if an aggressive pirate deck is gonna stick, it looks like Demon Hunter is the place to do it. Now that said, Shaman is also gonna have decent access to this package, and I think it works really well with Cookie, the Demon Hunter tourist for Shaman. So I think we could see this package actually succeed in both Shaman and Demon Hunter, and in some ways Shaman might be even stronger for it, because that evolve upside is kind of a secondary game plan that allows them to sort of leverage the damage from all of this, but then also still turn it into even crazier boards and kind of extract extra value out of it as well. So but that's it. Demon Hunter also has more efficient damage output, so they could both kind of be successful in their own ways. Demon Hunter's all in aggression, and then Shaman maybe kind of pivots into more of a mid-rangey evolve support plan for it. But ultimately, this seems like a really nice weapon for both of those decks to succeed a ton. So that said, the Sigil of Skydiving here, we'll go ahead and talk about that. 2-mana Fell spell at the start of your next turn. Summon 3 1/1 pirates with charge. I mean, that's just really efficient. 2 mana for 3 bodies. Normally you'd say, oh, the delay on this is kind of a problem, but it's not when they have charge. Often that's actually really nice to know that you're still going to be able to get the damage, and in some ways kind of makes it even harder for the opponent to deal with all of those bodies. If you summon a bunch of 1/1s on turn 2, sometimes the opponent can just clear those up, but now there's a delay. They're kind of hidden away, tucked away for a little bit, and then they can't really deal with them until their turn 3, as it were, which could be clunkier from a mana standpoint. Suddenly it gets more awkward, and you still get to net the damage. You still get time to play into your adrenaline fiend and stuff. So the fact that these are backloaded is actually really useful in this specific scenario, which I think makes this card good. Also keep in mind now, I think much like auras, sigils can be stacked. So you can play 2 of these at once on turn 4, and then have a crazy turn 5 with 6 pirates getting summoned all at once, and have some silliness to support that. So ultimately, I think this card just looks really good. And then we got Dangerous Cliffside. I think this is maybe the least powerful of these 3 cards, but I think it still actually makes sense. Ultimately, 4 mana for sort of 6 1/1 charging pirates. That's a fireball if you look really closely, but more importantly, it's just bodies that you can get reliably. And again, the delay on this isn't necessarily a bad thing, because you can still turn it into instant damage later. You can still ensure lethality off this, even if it's a little bit delayed. But I think what will often happen with this one is you kind of go for 4 pirates all at once on it. You play this on turn 4, turn 5, whatever, and you summon 2, and then you have an attack via a weapon or a hero power or something, and then you get 2 more, right? So it's kind of 4 pirates all at once, and then you probably save those last 2 pirates for later, the following turn or something after you attack, basically. If you had Wind Fury, you could go all at once, but that's going to be tough, obviously, in Demon Hunter. So yeah, I actually think that's fine. The fact that you can kind of get 4 at once reliably. If you only ever got 2 at a time, it'd be tough, but 4 at once kind of catches you up on the mana expenditure on this a little bit more quickly. Now, this is a little slow compared to a lot of the other pirate stuff we've seen. That might be its downside. That's why I'm less excited about it, but it does feel like it kind of achieves that critical mass of having all the charging pirates, having all the tokens. And again, in Shaman 2, this actually makes even maybe more sense in that more mid-rangey Shaman sort of world I talked about, because these pirates, you play this down, you save the pirates for later, then they become really good evolve targets. You can start stacking up more bodies for the cookie or whatever evolve effect to become more useful in that way. So probably better in Shaman than Demon Hunter, but still maybe the weakest of the 3, but that doesn't by any means make it a bad card. And then our final Demon Hunter card here is Paraglide. It's not Glide, it's almost Glide, it's Paraglide. It's a 3-mana spell. Both players draw 3 cards, and outcast only you do. So this one's really interesting, right? Just looking at it for your own sake, 3 mana, draw 3. It's pretty solid. You know, obviously the classic example is always Arcane Intellect, 3 mana, draw 2, and that felt good for years. It doesn't really feel good anymore. We have such efficient card draw, so many crazy ways to draw cards and discount them, and just like so many things, you know, that this does feel a little bit honest in that regard. Especially Demon Hunter has a lot of efficient ways to draw cards. I don't know that Demon Hunter is excited enough about Paraglide to run it in decks. It's definitely one of those things, like, you discover it, sometimes you're pumped, you know, especially if it's outcasted on the right side of your hand off Generation or Discover. It's like, okay, yeah, that's going to feel really good in games, but running it in a deck list is a little bit different. So I don't really think this is worth it at a base level. Really not for Shaman either. Shaman's maybe a little bit more in need of card draw sometimes, but still not worth it. So, you know, then we have to talk about the downside, because very often drawing 3 cards for your opponent is a real notable downside. Like, that is a risk. You have to outcast this in some matchups where you're playing a more aggressive deck that's emptying their hand. You just can't give them 3 cards. That's way too risky. Even though you see yours first, it's just not going to be worth it, because you're just giving them so much stuff to kill you with. It's not going to be right. Now, there are some very specific matchups where, you know, burning cards can be worth it. In many cases, burning cards does nothing effectively because, you know, you're not going to fatigue anyway. But there are some matchups where you kind of go to fatigue, you know, really greedy priest and warrior type stuff. And the question is, will either Shaman or Demon Hunter do that? Especially Shaman is running like Cookie and an evolved package. It seems unlikely. Demon Hunter seems even more unlikely. So using this as a mill card, as a way to burn your opponent's stuff because their hand is too full or whatever, it seems challenging. And in particular, you know, with sort of Cold Light Oracle of old that did the same sort of thing, you really needed to stack those effects to make that threatening. And that was like, you know, multiple battle cries and stuff off the Cold Light and multiple mill style effects. With only one, you just can't get enough of that together to make that an actual package or a deck or an archetype or a game plan. And doing it just as a one-off just won't be worth it in 99% of scenarios. So ultimately, all that said, that leaves Paraglide in a really iffy spot for me. I just don't think this is efficient enough card draw. The risk on it is huge if you don't outcast it in normal matchups. And any sort of like burn plan potential just doesn't make enough sense to me. So yeah, I just don't think this card is all that good. So that's it. Let's go ahead and rate these cards from 1 to 5 stars. Arana Thrill Seeker is a 3-star card. Cliff Dive is a 3-star card. All-Terrain Void Hound is a 2-star card. Climbing Hook is a 2-star card. Skirting Death is a 3-star card. Adrenaline Fiend is a 5-star card. Sigil of Skydiving is a 4-star card. Dangerous Cliffside is a 4-star card. Paraglide is a 2-star card. And yeah, there you go. That's the Demon Hunter set. What do you guys think about these cards? Can Big Demon Hunter get there? Is Pirate Demon Hunter as scary as I think? Seems pretty spooky. Share those thoughts some more down in the comments below. Stay tuned for Priest cards tomorrow. Maybe that'll open up some more info about Arana here. But until then, thanks much for watching. And until next time, game on.